Hey, we're back with another CannaTech podcast, and we're with Jack Naito from Luna Technologies out of Portland, Oregon. How you doing, Jack?
I'm great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me on.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, first of all, for helping expand my definition of technology. When you and I talked the first time, my challenge is I come from infrastructure and now cybersecurity and that world of former Microsoft vendor, and I need to think a little bit bigger in the cannabis supply chain about technology. Right? It's not just servers and passwords.
Yeah. The industrial equipment side of it is a pretty big piece too.
Yeah, yeah, and so what is Luna Technologies? Let's go A to Z. What's your story?
Sure. Yeah. So I founded Luna Technologies in 2016 with an old
Okay.
friend of mine, and we manufacture and sell cannabis oil extraction equipment.
Okay.
So kind of started out of a need. My business partner, Kyler, he was already in an extractor. He was working under a medical license at the time back in 2015. And all the equipment on the market at that time, it was pretty bad, to put it nicely. It all
Yeah.
came from other industries. None of it was built or designed for cannabis extraction. There was a lot of safety issues. There were a ton of issues trying to scale your business with the equipment. Just everything you might expect when you try to use equipment that wasn't designed for the purpose you're using it for.
Yeah.
So originally I came on to work for Kyler to help him, one, just improve his process, and then two, automate it. And back then, what we were doing at the time is BHO extraction, butane hash oil. We thought everyone was going to be automating BHO. Then after about 6 months, we realized no one else was doing it. And so we started this company, Luna Technologies, to design and manufacture the equipment.
Man. And what's the workflow, right? Because my audience, they're primarily geeks. And so we can kind of double click down into the workflow. Again, if we were talking workflow in my past life, we would, quite frankly, be the traditional seed to sale ERP technology conversation. So help me understand your workflow in the different machinery and that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah. So starting from harvest, right now, most cannabis is harvested by hand, and that's just because of the scale of farms. Most farms are pretty small. So you'll harvest it by hand, maybe with equipment, then you'll process it. You'll have a plant with seeds and stems and buds, and well, probably not seeds, but you'll have to process that into something that can be extracted. And typically that just means taking off everything that doesn't have THC on it. So whatever method you use for that, maybe it's hand trimming, maybe it's putting it through a machine, you get down to what we call just biomass, which is our feedstock for extraction. And
Okay.
it looks just kind of like the weed that you see, just in a bulk bag.
Right. Right.
Then from there, it's often stored in a freezer. If you're processing fresh frozen material, which is the highest quality, as soon as it's harvested, it goes into a freezer. Then from the freezer, it'll go to extraction, which is where Luna Technologies sits. And that's where we dissolve the cannabis in a solvent. We extract out all of the valuable components, which are all the cannabinoids and all the terpenes, which are flavors and aromas of the plant. I'm in.
Hey, yeah, no, there we go. Hey, we're keeping it
All
live.
right.
I like it. No, I like it. Go on.
All right. So yeah, after you extract all the cannabinoids and terpenes, then it goes into some sort of post-processing process. And that's either for BHO extraction, often it's just a solvent purge where we take out all the residual solvent, so there's none of it left that the end user consumes. Or if you're making other products that aren't BHO specific, you might go through a number of refining steps where you're going to separate out basically all the impurities that you accidentally extracted that you didn't mean to. So in the end, once you get to your final product, then you package it either into a vape pen or maybe a tincture or some sort of distillate that can go into an edible.
Man, just fascinating. Yeah. By analogy, is this similar to maybe the way spirits are processed? And I'm just saying by analogy. I understand you're in a different line of work, but I do enjoy a vodka, so I'm just trying to get my arms
Sure,
around this.
yeah. Yeah. So with vodka distillation, you start with some crude product that no one wants to drink, right? And then you do a series of distillations, which is just another way to say separations. And you separate out everything that you don't want to drink from everything that you do want to drink. And
Yeah.
usually it takes a number of steps to get to the final product that you want to drink, especially with a high quality vodka. And so we do a similar process. There's a couple, we do separation. We do both cold separation and hot separation.
Okay.
So hot separation is distillation. Cold separation is just where we separate things by changing by their difference in freezing points. Whereas with distillation, you separate things by their difference in boiling points. But at the end of the day, we're refining a consumer product and just making it something more attractive for the consumer.
Yeah. And what's your background? Are you one of these PhDs in biosciences, or what's your background to even know this stuff?
Yeah, I came from I have a master's degree in mechanical engineering,
Okay.
and when Kyler poached me and offered me this opportunity, I was working in the aerospace industry, working on automation.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Yeah, because I have a real good friend down here in Austin, Texas, a pretty go-getter young man, and compared to my age, it's all relative, but he's the CEO of a brewery in Austin, and before that, he was the COO, so he was on the operations side with in these warehouses with tanks that look like what you have on your web page, right?
Oh yeah.
And he gave me a tour and he walked me through, and you do this, he really knew his stuff. And he wondered about what would the possibility be at a future date if he leaves Texas, number one, and number two, if he wants to go to the cannabis industry. But what do you see out there? So this guy has an MBA. I mean, he's a smart guy, and he knows manufacturing for breweries and fairly good sized breweries. Do you see that in your industry, where in Portland in particular with the craft breweries, do you see people coming over from the other industry and getting retrained? Is that a natural act?
I think it's natural. There's a lot of overlaps between the two industries, and especially on where Lunar Technologies sits, our equipment, BHO, is really designed for craft products. And so there's a ton of overlap where with beer, you're talking about hops and different qualities of hops and all the flavors and aromas. That's the same thing with BHO extracts, where you're trying to take everything that the plant had to offer and put it into the consumer product. And then on the same side, you deal with the same problems with manufacturing from a natural product. You have inconsistencies in what you start with, but you're trying to get to a consistent end product. And so it's a lot of the same issues where automation really comes into play and helps standardize and boost your efficiency and quality.
Well, let's talk about that. The inconsistency in edibles is well known. So one evening you might have a indica peanut butter cup and it meets your needs. You watch a little cable news, you go to bed, sleep like a baby. Another evening, you may not cop a bus. The third evening, you might wake up stoned.
I think there's a couple basic problems in cannabis. One, it's just because we're a new industry, quality control is tough, especially with edibles. You have to make sure we're putting a tiny amount of cannabis in a lot of food, right? And so you have to get a homogeneous mixture to make sure that every edible actually has the same dose. And most
Correct.
places are doing it. Some places it's just hard to get right. And then the other side of it is that we're just missing the science on how the body reacts to different edibles. And that's, we're just many years away from getting there.
Yeah. Yeah, because and I recently did travel. Well, not far. I went to South by Southwest in downtown Austin, but it takes about an hour to drive in and park. So it felt like travel. Of course, they have some evening receptions, and I have a Tito's vodka and cran. And here's my point. With Tito's, I can be in Austin, Texas, Denver, Miami, and I kind of know the experience I'm going to have, right? I'm going to have a drink, and my expectations are managed. What I'm hearing you say is we're not really there with cannabis, right?
I think some businesses are there, some businesses aren't. We're getting pretty close. And it's really all just about testing on the inside, making sure that your consumer product has exactly what you say it has.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, we're going to keep an eye on you. I appreciate you raising your hand and educating us on what do you call it, industrial equipment technology, a different category.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
happy to be here and happy to talk with you.
Yeah, continued success. Thanks,
Thank
Jack.
you. Thanks.